Addiction has a chokehold on so many of us, and it is getting worse. Statistics show that behavioral addictions like porn, gaming, cryptocurrency trading is getting worse and worse and worse. Couple that with substance abuse, about 50% of people who go into addiction programs are relapsing, and the medical system has no idea what to do. We look at addiction as a genetic, brain, and environmental problem, but really it goes deeper. In this episode of Heal Thyself, we are going to a deeper perspective on addiction and something that can possibly change an addict's life, and that is somatics. Listen to this episode to get the deepest perspective that you're going to ever on addiction and how to begin healing from it on Heal Thyself. Okay, welcome to this very special show discussing addiction. And maybe you know someone who has been suffering with addiction. Maybe you might have been one of those people. And addiction is often misunderstood. And I say that and I mean it because a lot of us don't really have a way to pinpoint what is the mechanism behind addiction. And this is permeating the medical industry. And it's often just misunderstood as, okay, this person has a lack of willpower, they've made poor life choices, but it's actually a lot more complex, as you may or may not know. But when we think of addiction, it's got different layers. It's got the biological, the psychological, the societal, and in this one, we're going to talk a lot about the traumatic part, right? When it comes to conventional treatments, they have helped many, but still, we don't have a hold on addiction. A lot of people are relapsing and not knowing why. So it's really crucial for us to understand what is the deepest mechanism coming from me in this field for addiction. And we're going to go into it so we have a lot of clarity of which we can provide our loved ones who are deep in addiction. So before we jump into this episode, I want to give love for our sponsor, Jasper, some of the best air purifiers that you're going to find across the board. They're beautiful looking and they get the job done. They're going to run a Black Friday sale from November 13th to Black Friday. And if you miss the Black Friday window, don't worry about it. You can still use the code DRG for 10% off. Go to jasper.co. All right, let's get back to this episode. In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to different perspectives, possibly a new perspective that you may have not encountered before when it comes to addiction. It's a somatic perspective. And this approach actually looks at addiction, not just as a brain disorder, but something that is actually deeply tied in our nervous system, deeply confounded in trauma. And really the mechanism of how people in addiction have become disconnected from their bodies. And I wouldn't have put together a show if I haven't seen these deep somatic practices be really powerful and helpful for people overcoming addiction. And actually, as we understand this more, we can uncover new tools that are actually going to help us reverse addiction for ourselves and our loved ones. In the show, we're going to define addiction. We're going to explore the science, the statistics, how we treat it conventionally, and then we're going to deep dive into the somatic perspective. What is it, why it matters, and how it can transform recovery. And by the end, you will actually have a new lens and new view on addiction. And maybe some of the tools to start making changes, real changes, right? To your life and the ones you care about. Let's get into it. What is addiction? Addiction is defined by the American Society of Addiction Medicine as treatable, chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, environment, and an individual's life experiences. It manifests as a compulsive substance or behavior despite harmful consequences, right? And that makes sense. Now, what is the role of the brain though? When we think about the reward system in the brain, when you do something pleasurable, like eat sweets, let's say you get a little chocolate candy, or when you win a game, right? Competitive game, let's say pickleball or something, or you take a drug, the brain is going to flood your body with dopamine. And this is a really beautiful chemical because it is the evolutionary way of your body saying, do that again. I like that. Do that again. But in addiction, this system somehow is hijacked. And over time, the brain's reward pathways, they change. They start to change up. And now the person who is in addiction feels it's actually essential for survival to use whatever they're using or whatever they're getting into behavior, even if they know it's causing harm. And when we think even beyond the substances, While most people actually think that drugs and alcohol when they hear addiction, right? A lot of us do. Some think of gambling, some think of excessive gaming, sex addiction, social media even. It's still activating the same reward circuit. While you're doing this, I like this, do this more. While you're doing this, I like this, do this more. And it's that compulsion, because the more you're getting that signal, do this more, this feels good, we begin to shut down that resistance, right? Or having agency over our own choices, and the compulsion gets stronger and stronger and stronger. But there's actually a role of shame. And many people with addiction actually are walking around carrying a heavy, 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 heavy burden of shame. And it's actually perpetuated because it's funny, we're in that shame and society is stigmatizing us. So we actually relive that shame. And the shame cycle is deepening more and more, which makes it harder to seek health. When we think about addiction as a whole, according to the World Health Organization, over 35 million people suffer globally from substance abuse disorders. And of those 35 million people, 10%, only 10% receive adequate treatment. And the behavioral addictions, these are rising, right? It's not just drugs, it's not just alcohol. Behavioral addictions are blowing up. That's compulsive use of the internet, compulsive use of social media. 40% of adults in 2023 actually surveyed that they have problematic smartphone abuse. They're on it too much. And I know for a fact there are people listening, probably the large majority of you, that is on your cell phone more than you want to be, okay? Not only that, there's an economical impact. In the United States alone, addiction costs over $740 billion annually in healthcare expenses, right? And we have lost productivity, and we have even the crime that is connected to addiction. But relapsing is the major thing. All right, let me take a quick break and tell you something that has become a wonderful game changer. It is part of my daily routine. It's been for the better part of this whole year. Nuzest Good Green Vitality. I was working with another green company powder, and they got really expensive and the quality went down. So I moved to one that is better, right? In true transparency and true quality. Nuzest Good Green Vitality is my favorite one out there. And I love them because they're always very humble, family oriented, not pretentious, and transparent, right? And they're a company that is open to sharing their third-party testing. And that's really important, that a company holds that accountability for themselves. And Nuzest has been doing it for such a long time. I'm such a fan of Nuzest. They're protein powders, and now they're green powder. So they have this green powder that I take every single day. I take it every morning. It's one of the first things I take. I either put in my smoothie or I just take it straight up in water. It tastes great in water, but it's something that I take with me too. I have these little packs, not just a little can, but I have these packs. And now I'm bringing these packs with me to my retreat tomorrow. And I'll take a video. I make it every single morning. You'll see Good Green Vitality is fantastic. It is all-in-one nutritional boost. And what I love about it, it's comprehensive. It gives you a powerful blend of vitamins, minerals, superfoods. There's some probiotics. It's got a nice antioxidant mix in there. And it actually is starting to replace so many of the supplements that I would take, especially in the winter, keeping my immune system strong. I know that with just one scoop, I'm getting a lot of that replaced in there. So it's really, really good. Simplifying, right? We need simplicity in our lives. Too much. This isn't the time to do too much. It's a time to get very clear. So what I've noticed, focus and energy, two big things. The days I take it, I have great energy until night. You can ask people around me. I get a lot of energy at night. My digestion feels good. Definitely my immune system. I haven't been sick since I've taken it, knock on wood. And for me, subjectively, I feel like my skin's got a nice healthy glow. So I mix it in the morning, every morning in some water or my smoothie, as I said, and it's earned a place as one of my number one things for my daily routine. It's a foundation for me. And if you're ready to try it out, and doesn't taste like the green powders that you might like, the trauma you have in the past from green powders, it ain't the same. It actually has a nice taste. Go to nuzest.com, use the code HEALTHY for 15% off of your first order. That is NUZEST.com, and the promo code is HEALTHY, HEALTHY. Let's talk about something that's been a game changer for me. It is Puori. It is Puori's Ultra Pure Omega-3 Fish Oil. No fishy burps. Those are the worst, especially when you have a poor quality fish oil. I remember in college, I would do that all the time. But when we think about it is why these fish oils can become oxidated. They may be rancid. And this is why Puori's O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil is set apart from the rest. It is a super clean, transparent, batch-tested company. They go far and beyond to make sure that the quality of fish oil that you're getting is quality. It's not rancid. You're getting tested for over 200 different contaminants, heavy metals, pesticides. You're knowing that you're taking actually a therapeutic potent dose of omegas, 2,000 milligrams per dose. It's actually supporting your heart, your eyes, your brain, and someone who's always doing a lot, right? We want to make sure that we're giving our body the proper nutrition, especially when we're on the go. So if you want to try really potent omega-3 fish oil, and we know omega-3s are anti-cancer, go to get the Puori one. Go to puori.com/DRG, use the code DRG for 20% off of your order. And that works with their subscription pricing too. So you're getting a third off basically, right? So go to Puori, PUORI.com/DRG and use the code DRG at checkout. If you love the podcast and you want to be down with the Dr. G Heal Thyself community, we give incredible tips every single week on getting a healthier physical, mental, and emotional body. The newest updates of my favorite products, the newest updates of my favorite practices. Stay in the loop by joining the Dr. G community. All you got to do is go to any one of my posts on Instagram and comment the word news. You'll get a DM to join. And this is the disheartening thing. We just had Michael Chernow on the show, and he was talking about how he suffered with addiction, drug addiction. And he overdosed. He overdosed from drugs. He overdosed, almost died, pale white, in the shower. He was actually put by his girlfriend in a cold tub, and the cold running water actually brought him back to life. And so close to dying, he said, "I'm never going to do this again. This almost killed me." And one of the biggest bombs he dropped was 4 hours later, he was using again, right? So imagine how strong that addiction is. So relapse rates are high. So even after people are completing treatment at treatment centers, relapsing rates from substance use disorders are ranging from 40 to 60%, right? It's like, let's say on average, 50%. 1 in 2 people are just going to relapse. And that's because we need more comprehensive solutions. And I don't think that addiction centers are looking at it from a deeper perspective. They're looking at it from the mind and the brain when that's not the problem. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit. Substance addictions are major. Alcohol is one of the biggest ones. It is affecting over 14 million adults in the United States. You probably know at least one person who is abusing alcohol, and it's causing liver disease, cancer, cognitive decline. We know the opioid crisis. There's been Netflix shows, there's been movies, and it's claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. And synthetic opioids like fentanyl, they're the leading cause of overdose that we know, right? There's also stimulants, it's nicotine. We know a lot of people who are addicted to cigarettes. And then the behavior one is huge. Gambling, sex, phones, video games, big one. There's actually another one that no one's really talking about. There's emerging addictions like cryptocurrency trading, right? There's a lot of people who are going crazy on crypto, and it's become their form of gambling. And we're not talking about this yet. It's going to come on because as crypto grows, inevitably it's going to arise a new problem because people are people. And we're not connected to the body. Online shopping, another one. But we think of famous, because, addiction isn't evading anyone. Everyone is subject to it. And the thing about addiction is that it doesn't evade. It doesn't just pick people who are down and out. It picks everyone. It picks people, particularly who are suffering deep down inside. And we're going to go over that mechanism. But I remember Robert Downey Jr. in the 90s. That was a huge thing, right? Like here is this talented actor, and he was consumed by substance abuse. And he overcame addiction actually through treatment and mindfulness. And that was a big thing for his recovery, is mindfulness. Demi Lovato, some of you know her, right? And she's battled with addiction, and she has open conversations. You see that she's talking about addiction and mental health. Did you know Elton John, one of my favorite artists ever? He actually attributes his sobriety to support groups, right? Becoming a recovery advocate in himself, but he was drinking alcohol left and right, and he was dependent on it. But I'm highlighting these stories to remind us that it doesn't discriminate, right? Everyone is affected by it. But what is the medical? Let's go into the medicine. What is conventionally, how are we looking at addiction? we have this neurobiology perspective, right? Addiction is going to rewire the brain's pathways and it's going to create this physical dependency. And we have a genetic predisposition, right? If it runs in your family, you have a higher risk of it. Also, conventionally, we do look at trauma and stress. Early childhood trauma, we know that from the ACE study, especially when you have that, it's going to prime the brain and the body for addiction. And when it comes to conventional treatments, like how are we treating it? What are we doing about it? There's not that much. We have drugs like methadone and naltrexone, and they're used to manage cravings and withdrawal symptoms. We have cognitive behavioral therapy talking about the addiction, triggers, 12-step programs, right? But it's challenged, right? It could be effective for many, but a lot of people are going back into relapse, 50%, right? We'll say on average. So we need to talk about something that, from my perspective, I see as the most powerful intervention for addiction. And I will go into this right now. I suffered with addiction, and it took me a long time to even come to terms. I did a whole show on this, and I spoke about it openly, but where I come from, the masculinity, right? The more of a man you are comes from the more promiscuous you are, the more notches you have under your belt. And it was a very big party scene. It was very fraternity energy, right? It was very young, irresponsible, and ultimately out of integrity, right? But then my normal, which was already abnormal, became even more abnormal. And it was when my mom passed away. When she passed away in 2011, something very potent happened. I wasn't able to express that sadness. In fact, I dissociated from it. And my number one vice was partying and drinking and sometimes even drugs, right? But the drinking and partying was the big one. And being able to lean on that as my crutch, as my numbing agent, as my soothing agent, ultimately led to sexual addiction, right? Because as I started cooling down on the alcohol, that vice, that energy, that pain which was held inside, which was not expressed, that sadness for 10 years needed to come out in the most skewed of ways, and it went into sex. So sex addiction started, and it was suffocating. It was suffocating such that I, to this day, will always have the deepest compassion for people in addiction, because I know what it feels like to have an anxiety attack because you don't have that soothing agent in front of you. And for me, the soothing agent was the warmth of another woman's body next to mine. And that was the only thing that helped me feel calm and grounded. It's sad. And I can imagine that could have been drugs. I can imagine that could have been alcohol. I could imagine that could have been eating. I could imagine that could have been video games. At the time, social media wasn't popping off, but oh yeah, the way that I'm on my phone right now, just by virtue of work, that probably would have been a major vice. And it's still, in many ways, part of a vice of mine, right? And I have to have real control, boundaries on it. Anyway, I say all of this because it wasn't until I actually stopped and was with myself. And when I say 10 years, I mean, we went from 2011, it wasn't until 2020, right? It wasn't until 2020, right? 9 years till I really, really began to feel. And it's because I was stuck in the mountains of Topanga and I had nowhere to go other than be with myself. My nearest friend was down a mountain 30 minutes. So here I am in the mountains having 5 days of anxiety attacks every night. My heart's beating. My hands are clammy. I'm breathing hard. I feel like I'm going to die. And shout out to actually Peter Crone, because he was someone I just met at the time and we were texting. And he actually helped me lead me through that anxiety. And then once that anxiety started going away, I started to feel again. And that feeling of sadness was unfathomable. It was suffocating. It was like I was drowning. And it was 30 days, every day, every morning straight, that I cried and I wailed and I cried and I wailed. Right. And after that, it was really interesting. This addiction thing that I was suffering with, and at the time it wasn't sex addiction anymore. It was just like dating addiction at that point. What I was suffering with started to slowly go away. Over the span of 2020, about a year later into 2021, everything started to change. That whole perspective, I found myself needing less. I found myself feeling more comfortable in my body. I found myself not having that urgency. I found myself getting off alcohol completely. I found myself not going out anymore. And it changed my life so much. And this is why I feel so strong about the somatic perspective of addiction. So what does it mean? Well, when we think about somatics, it comes from the Greek word soma. That means the body. And it's really a therapeutic approach. And it's really a therapeutic approach that's going to focus the connection between the mind and the body. And when we think of something like talk therapy, that's primarily on the cognitive level, right? We know that. We're talking to the mind, right? We're talking to the identity. Somatics actually goes deeper. It delves into actually physical sensations that are deep down inside. Remember, the anxiety that I was feeling, physical sensations of stored trauma and patterns within the body. But why does this matter in addiction? Well, addiction is often a response to an internal sense of unease. I want to say that again. Addiction is a response to something happening internally. We are dysregulated. And it's not just about the brain. It's looking for dopamine, but also it's something about the body. It's the body. The dopamine is downstream, which we're thinking of conventionally. It's the body looking desperately to manage unwelcomed, overwhelming, unlovable, unallowed emotions. And these are manifesting as uneasy sensations in the body, like anxiety. So had someone told me this in 2020, maybe my life would have changed. In 2011, these uncomfortable sensations that I was feeling in the body that were anxiety were protecting something deeper inside of me. And it was a sadness that was not allowed based on who I believed myself to be at the time. And so this repressed sadness, every time it was coming up or when it wanted to come up or when I was drinking and it really wanted to come up, anxiety came over, sex addiction came on. So imagine the mechanism now of addiction that we look at. Maybe, just maybe, it's not a dopamine thing in the brain. Maybe that's a downstream manifestation. But maybe these people have never been allowed to feel these emotions that are coming up, and addiction goes, don't worry, I got you. Let's numb it, let's soothe it. And although it's harmful to the body in many ways, right? These addictions, this is the way we're soothing it. And the body has a major role in it. The trauma and the nervous system are deeply connected. Addiction is going to be linked to trauma, especially when it's unresolved. And remember, trauma is not just a psychological experience. It's something that is experienced and lived in the body. And when there's a traumatic experience, the nervous system is going to get stuck in a state, in that fight or flight or freeze. So someone who grew up in a volatile home, the body, yes, may always be hypervigilant, on edge. And then decades later, addiction becomes a way to soothe that edge, numb that edge, balance that constant stress response. Or maybe even another mechanism is if you have two brothers and they're abused by their dad, maybe one brother goes and uses that energy and becomes addicted to his books and addicted to his studies and graduates valedictorian and then goes to the best school and then raises all this money and becomes a successful CEO and a billionaire. Maybe that person is addicted to that work, to being a workaholic. But maybe his brother, right? The dad says, you're nothing to both kids. The first brother, the CEO, is trying to prove that he is something. Maybe the second one actually believes in shame that he is nothing, and maybe he becomes a drug addict. But you tell me the difference between both brothers. One just got addicted to working, the other got addicted to drugs. There's no difference. One just believed he's not good enough, the brother in drugs, and one believed, no, I am good enough and I'm going to prove that I am. You see the pain that people are living with? There's a lot of CEOs that I met. I used to work for one. Pain. These people are in pain. Just because they have a lot of money don't mean anything. These people are in pain, okay? So when you think about all these mechanisms behind it, when we think about polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, it's actually explaining how the nervous system reacts to stress and safety by way of the vagus nerve, which is bringing us back to safety. And addiction is often arising because someone is stuck in a constant state of dysregulation. They are in a state of anxiety or panic, or goes right down to hypoarousal, the numbness and disconnection. And you can oscillate. You can actually be, oh my God, I'm anxious, I'm panic. And then you can go to a state of numbness and disconnection. And guess what? When you use in that numbness and disconnection, it can be exciting. It can be arousing. Let's say you're addicted to porn. That's exciting, arousing. It's bringing you out of that numbness so you can feel again. Or let's say you're in hypoarousal and you're using addiction to porn for something, that can actually soothe and calm down the anxiety and panic. So it modulates. It's both ways. And emotions we know are stored in the body, right? Fear, sadness, guilt, shame, deep, 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 deep pain. That doesn't just vanish because you sit down and talk to someone about it. It goes away when you actually witness how deep it is, when you actually allow it to be in the body, when you move through it. And when it's not processed, it will be stored in the body. It's going to manifest as pain, tension, dysregulation, hypervigilance, numbness. So addiction oftentimes is the way that we suppress or manage these unresolved feelings. So treatment centers, their first virtue of being built on this should be built on somatics. If you want to treat addiction as a center, if you want to treat addiction as a doctor, you want to treat addiction as a counselor, the first thing you need to do is become a master of the body and somatics, because I promise you, you will be healing thousands and thousands of people, okay? Addiction actually can be reversed when we look at it through the somatic lens. And the somatic lens is this: addiction isn't the problem. It's not the problem. It is the body's manifestation. It is the solution that the ego, the mind has found, right? To manage our pain, to keep us feeling connected to something, to numb the trauma, the pain that we feel, that we're not allowing ourselves to feel. It's the way we regulate when the body and mind are out of sync, right? When the mind is feeling anxious and the body's feeling tense and you need something to soothe it, or everything's feeling shut down. Someone who drinks, and I've known a lot of people who drink excessively. I still know sex addicts. One just texted me yesterday, stuff that we would conversate about so many years ago. It was just interesting to see that, right? And I was like, wow, he's still stuck in it, right? But he was my partner in crime at the time, right? Because you attract where you are. But when we think of people, and I know you know of alcoholics over here, someone who drinks in excess, they might not just be addicted to the alcohol. We know that. We intuitively know that. Maybe it's not the alcohol. We know that moment when they're over drinking, but it's bringing them temporary relief. But relief from what? And it's repressed emotions, parts of them that are not allowed to be expressed. And many people with addiction, they're feeling disconnected to their bodies. They are feeling unsafe in their environment, but somatic awareness builds that connection again, right? So how do you get started? Go to a breathwork class. Just start there. That is the intro to somatics, right? It is a powerful tool. It's in my estimation, not the answer to go through everything, but it's an intro. It's an intro class, right? Do a breathwork. It's going to help activate the nervous system. It's going to help build these awarenesses in your body, right? And when you're feeling something coming up, how can you regulate yourself? And do you want to? This is an important question. If you're out and everything's overwhelming, like let's say you go to a concert with your daughter and it's really overwhelming. A great way to ground yourself is using a 4-7-8 breath. 4, inhale, 7, hold, 8, exhale. That's a great way. And sometimes you actually want to feel that anxiety. Because if you don't feel that anxiety, those emotions that are under are not going to show up ever. And if you don't make friends with your anxiety, you're still going to stay in addiction, right? So it's really important. But breath work, connecting to the breath, is going to be really important. It helps many people connect to something. It helps many people actually activate their parasympathetic system, which is really important because it allows us to feel safe in our own body. So really, really important. You can do body awareness practices, doing a yoga nidra or any meditation that drops you in the body. Maybe people in addiction don't have to meditate out of their body. They have to meditate into their body, feeling sensations, tightness, discomfort, pain, tuning into that, actually having a body scan and actually connecting very deeply to your body every single day. If you're in addiction, this is the number one thing. Connect to your body every single day. Feel your body every single day. Drop in there. If you don't feel it the first 30 days, the 31st day, maybe you drop in a little bit more. I promise you, the more you do it, your body will begin to trust you more and more and more. It's a downstream effect of actually abandoning yourself, that your body's going to stay contracted and you're going to stay numb, connecting to the breath and actually noticing, when I want to use, how does that feel in my body? I know for a fact it was in my belly, and that's fear. That's fear and anger. Every time I was scared or every time I was angry, I was using sex to calm myself down. So those emotions, that sadness, it's funny because I had asthma, before I released that sadness. And then when I went up to Tamenga and the asthma went away, right? That emotion and sadness was only the first level. The sadness was just level one. Under that was all this anger, and all that was this fear and shame around sexuality, the way I grew up religious and my own connection to sex and sexuality. All these pieces started rolling out for the next 2-3 years. So the body's going to show you initially, how do you feel when you want to use? And it's going to make a major difference when you begin to connect to the body, connect to what you feel, where you feel it, and actually beginning to bring curiosity to it. But movement is fantastic too. Movement practice is a great way to move the energy, but intentional ones. Go work out, great, but do it intentionally. Now, most people aren't working out intentionally, so do something like a yoga practice, do something like Tai Chi, do something like Qigong, do something like dance, but not dancing from your head, intuitive dancing. That's a major way to recreate a connection to your body that is going to help you when you do your body scans laying down. And there's research behind this. Research actually shows that yoga in itself reduces cortisol levels, promotes emotional regulation, decreases substance abuse cravings. Touch, grounding. We need that. For those who are using, and you use when you feel alone, we need touch and we need grounding, right? So you can use your own hands, having gentle touch with yourself and creating safety, or asking a loved one for a hug, a deep heart-centric hug. And those who are loved ones of people who are addicted know that hug can actually change that person's day, if not their week, if not their life. I just heard it in a men's group yesterday. We were talking about it. So putting your feet on the ground as well, connecting to earth, major thing. Nature has a sublime ability to help us heal. And there actually is research supporting somatics and addiction. The ACE study, Adverse Child Experiences study, they found that individuals with a high number of childhood traumas are far more likely to develop addiction. And somatic therapies address this trauma. For yoga and mindfulness, research has shown, Harvard Medical School shows that yoga improves emotional regulation. We know that, decreased substance abuse, and now it's actually being integrated into many recovery programs. And what about in the brain? What happens in the brain? Well, the neuroscience of somatics is major. They have studies using brain imaging that shows somatic practices like, say, for example, breathwork can actually calm the amygdala. And this is the part of our brain that is really connected to fear. And it's reducing stress, the thing that we're really connecting to that's triggering a lot of these cravings. And I just want you to be aware that somatics is powerful. It plays such a major role when it comes to addiction. And unlike those conventional approaches that help, this actually focuses on getting to the root of addiction, which is unprocessed trauma, unprocessed emotions. When I say unprocessed trauma, I always mean unprocessed emotion, unprocessed parts of you that is leading to nervous system dysregulation, that is leading to disconnection or hypervigilance. Regardless, both of those feelings in the body are leading to using. So before we close this show, here's a simple thing you could do. You can place one hand on your heart, the other in your belly, close your eyes, and just take a deep breath into the belly, not into the chest. Belly, and when it's at 100%, hold it there. And actually feel your belly sticking out. And then breathe out. And we'll do it one more time. Hand on the chest, hand on the belly. Take a breath through the mouth, gently filling up, rising the belly, and stop. Hold it. Now breathe out. Now take a moment and just notice how you feel. Okay? This is what it feels like to begin to connect to your body. And that is the first step in reconnecting with yourself. So, addiction has been very personal in my life. And I know that some of you have people in your lives who are suffering. Send them this show. Send them this show. This show might give them a new perspective that changes their life, especially if they're ready. If addiction plays a role and it's valuable and for them to be in the pain matters, and they'd rather be in that, that's okay. Unfortunately for us, it's painful to watch, but if that's the value, they're not going to want to heal. People who don't want to heal are not going to heal. With that said, those who are ready and willing, give them the show and see what they say and see if they're inspired, and have them connect to their body, have them use these practices, okay? Thank you for listening to this episode. As always, please support the show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. It really, really helps grow the show. And as always, thank you for listening. All the love. Thank you.